Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today for another random thoughts to ponder video. I haven't done one of these in a little while. And these are just videos where, well, they can be about any kind of topic, but usually something where I'm trying to maybe give you a little bit of encouragement or just things to think about, food for thought. And today it's about thinking outside the box. The public school system, mainstream media, the medical industry, pretty much any .gov entity, they all have kind of conditioned us to think within this little box. And so there's only one way to do things, or we can't do something without the help of this, that, or the other thing. So let's just think about the things like we were conditioned to think that we could not brush our teeth with anything but store-bought toothpaste, or wash our hair with anything but store-bought shampoo. So this is a little box. We just never think about the possibility that we could make these things for ourselves. But even in that, there's not just one way to make any of this stuff for yourself. There's not one way to make a toothpaste or a deodorant that's going to suit you. There's many different ways, or a laundry detergent, or whatever it is that you need to make. And this applies to cooking and baking. And this is why when I put out recipes for anything, one of the reasons why when I first started my channel over 6 years ago, it wasn't about me giving people written recipes. It was about me showing people how to do things so that they could learn how to do it themselves and do it their own way. And then people started demanding written recipes. And so it's like, well, okay, I understand. We all need a place to start, especially when we're learning something new. I know when I first was learning how to make pie crusts and biscuits and yeast bread, and I was doing this as a teenager, and the many other things I do, I was using recipes at the time. But eventually, I didn't need the recipes anymore. And when I create bread recipes, I do have, let's say for a sweet bread, for example, I do have some basic ratios that I use, and I did write those down. I also can switch it up and change it all the time. I do the same thing with pancakes. I never follow a set recipe. I know the basic ratios I need of baking powder to flour and fat and that, and then I can change whatever I want in there. So when we're first learning things, obviously we need instruction. We need recipes or written instructions, or people on YouTube, or people in person showing us how to do these things. And that's a given. I mean, that's what we need. However, along with that, even as we're learning these things, we also can learn how to do it our own way that's going to better suit us. So let's say I'm making a recipe and I'm putting a lot of cayenne pepper in it or red pepper flakes. Well, that's not going to be suitable for everyone. Or maybe I'm using black pepper and somebody's allergic to it. Whatever it is. It's as simple as leaving it out. It's not that hard. Same thing goes with any of the medicinal extracts I make. A lot of times, or here's a great example. I have several videos out on a mixed greens blend. Each video is different because it all depends on what I'm getting the most of that year. Or through the years, I might change and think, oh, I would rather have much more of this green in there, such as nettle and dandelions, than these other ones. I still add these other ones if I have plenty of them, but I might put my main focus on a couple other greens. Whatever you do with this mixed greens doesn't have to, it's just, the whole reason I even shared the mixed greens idea was so people could learn how to take whatever it is growing in their garden, even things they might not realize are edible and nutritious, such as strawberry leaves or carrot tops, beet greens, and more, and dehydrate those up and put them in there so you're being able to use them and add them to many things throughout the year to get the various minerals and other nutrients that are in there. And so I had somebody come in and ask, well, I'm really allergic to nettle. What can I use in place of that? So that's a perfect example of learning how to think outside the box. You don't have to replace the nettle with something else. You can simply leave it out. It's your own blend. You make it however you want. So maybe you do want to replace it with something else. It could be meaning using more dandelion greens Or not even using dandelion greens at all. Maybe it's using more kale or amaranth leaves. That's another good one I'll add in there from time to time. Or maybe you have other types of greens that you're growing that are healthy and beneficial you would like to throw in there. There's so much you can use. You just got to think, okay, what's going to not change the flavor of my food too much if I add it in there? Because sometimes I'll throw in red mustard leaves, and those have a more powerful flavor to them. Dandelion leaves can be bitter, but once dehydrated up, they lose a lot of that bitterness. Same thing can be said with chicory leaves. So again, this is just an example. So you're probably growing greens that I don't grow. Just find out what is edible and healthy that you're already growing, and just toss them in there. It could even be stuff that you're harvesting wild. And again, the same would apply to any medicinal extract. So whenever I'm showing you recipes on medicinal extracts, I usually try to give you several other ideas, several other herbs that you can use. Instead, you can either add to what I'm already doing or replace them. For example, my pain remedy, I now add valerian leaves to it because I find that just really takes it over the top in how well it helps to take care of any kind of pain I have. Now, somebody else can't have valerian at all. Leave it out and just stick to the other herbs I use. Or don't use any of the herbs I used and instead use different herbs that I have in the list of herbs that are great for pain and inflammation. This is why I put together lists like this. I've been little at a time going over different ailments and so on, and then compiling different herbs, foods, and so on that you can do to help with those various conditions. Whether it be you're just trying to boost your eye health, your brain health, you're trying to heal up your joints, or deal with pain, or many, many different things. I have quite a few videos out now and still more to come. Then that list is so that you can go through there and not do it exactly the way I do, but look at the list, learn about the herbs, and learn about what you can grow, because that's going to be another thing. You know, if you're wanting to save money, whatever you can grow easily or grows wild around you already, those would be the things you're going to want to draw from, as long as you're not already on a medication that it's going to conflict with, and you're not allergic to it, and so on. These are all the things you have to find out for yourself, which is why I did a video a year or so ago on how to do your own research, which I'll also link to down below. And I'll also link to that full playlist on the natural remedies lists, so you can look through there. So again, it's about thinking outside the box. Let's just consider a lot of Patrick's videos. He has a lot of DIY videos where he, on the spot, had something that broke, something he needed to build or make new. Like when he built the chicken coop and the chicken run, he actually manufactured latches for both the door that goes into the coop itself and the gate that goes into the chicken yard. So he fabricated those himself. And so he has videos on how he did that. There's a whole series just on the chicken coop build. You know, he did all of that by his own design and figuring these things out for himself. And he has a lot of videos like that. The ones on the different ones he's doing on repairing this old dozer and just getting it in good working condition that he picked up a couple years ago. It's a 1976 crawler, and he's been doing a lot of work to get it almost as good as new. And a lot of this is stuff he just has been able to figure out on his own, or create parts and pieces all on his own. The problem with a lot of our education system these days, and I'm not just talking about the public school that are elementary school, I'm talking about colleges and universities. They're giving people information. They might be teaching people how to do stuff, but they're not teaching people how to think outside the box and learn how to create things on their own and be problem solvers. And that's what we all have to learn how to do. I mean, I've been guilty of that too. I mean, when I first got married, I had never even heard of people making, believe it or not, because my mom, she did some things from scratch, but she didn't do a lot of cooking and baking from scratch. A lot of things growing up came out of a can or a box. So I didn't know that people made their own chili from scratch. I didn't know people made their own pizza from scratch. These are things I taught myself and learned on my own. Once I found out, wow, I don't have to go down to the store and buy a can of chili. I can make it myself, and it's easy, and I can make it taste exactly how I want it to taste. And so that's the beauty of this stuff, is once you get out of that mindset is, why do I have to go to the doctor to get my knee examined when I can do the research for myself and find out and figure out exactly what's wrong with my knee? That way I can also figure out exactly how I can heal it up. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't go to the doctor for certain things. Obviously, there's certain things we need doctors for. But that second injury I did where I crumpled to the floor and then I already knew what had happened. And my son was wanting to take me to the hospital. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to the hospital because I know exactly what's wrong in there. And I was going to at least wait and make sure I hadn't torn the thing in half. Now, because that would probably require, the ligament, that would probably require surgery. But I wanted to make sure before I made an expensive trip down to the ER just to find out it's exactly what I thought it was. And they're not going to be able to do anything more than what I could do myself. So it's knowing this stuff. I'm not saying stay away from the doctor and all that. I'm just saying you need to learn how to evaluate these things for yourself. Just because your child has a little fever doesn't mean you got to run them to the doctor. This was something I saw a lot when I was teaching dance. In fact, one time I got invited to some little get together, and it just so happened that a lot of the ladies there, most of them had daughters that were in my dance class. Well, all the little girls were playing together. They were in the one little girl's bedroom, and they were jumping on the bed and jumping around and running around. And one little girl come running out to say something to her mom, and her mom saw how red-faced and sweaty she was and felt her head, and she freaked out. Oh, no, she's feverish. I'm going to have to take her to the doctor. And the silly thing about that is clearly she was hot and sweaty because they were cram packed in this little room and playing rough. It was just, that's the kind of thinking that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Every time a child gets the slightest earache, I got to run them to the doctor and get on antibiotics. Well, how about let's make sure, first of all, it's not what you think it is, and then find ways that you can cure that on your own. There's all kinds of home remedies for curing ear infections. In fact, here's just an example. When Patrick was working over in Duval for the water treatment plant there, he didn't tell me all of this until later, but he ended up with a double ear infection, bad, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse, and we were throwing a whole bunch of natural stuff at it. Finally, he went to the doctor. Doctor gave him some antibiotics, did nothing. And his ears were bad. The infection had actually spread clear out into the outer ear, and his ears hurt all the time. And I told him, the only other thing I can think of, certainly not going to hurt to try, is coconut oil. Rub coconut oil on the outside, melt it, and put it inside your ear. And he started doing that every day, both ears. And I can't remember how long it took, but I swear it was within 2 weeks. Totally healed it up. And he had been battling it for months. So that comes back to that video I did on how to do your own research. When you know how to look into these things, and then the more you just already know about these things, it's like, oh, that's right. I remember that coconut oil is a natural antibacterial and antifungal. So either way, whether it's a fungus infection or a bacterial infection, it should work. And it did. Well, here's what I found out later about the ear infections that he finally admitted, because I asked him when I'd learned something else about being exposed to certain chemicals. And sure enough, he admitted to me then that while he was at the treatment plant, there was something happened and he got exposed to a high dose of chemicals. And he didn't want to tell me because he was afraid I'd worry about him. Well, thankfully, it only caused him to get this double ear infection and nothing more. Anyway, side story there, but the main point of the story was, even though we did break down and he went to the doctor, it didn't do him any good. It actually came down to the coconut oil is what ended up curing him. So once you know these things, or at least know how to research these things, you can start putting pieces together and figure things out for yourself. And it doesn't mean we can't rely on other people from time to time, because we're not islands. We do need other people. And we also need to learn from other people that are more experienced than us. No matter how much you know about herbs or how much you know about DIY and metalworking and woodworking, there's always somebody that's going to have some information that you can learn from. And I say that to myself too, because there should never be an end to learning. Anybody who thinks that they've got it all figured out, whether it be about home canned foods or any kind of food preservation, medicinal herbs, cooking and baking, I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't care how smart you think you are. Even if you and another person might have the same amount of knowledge, this person over here might know a little bit more about this particular thing within this topic, while you might know a little bit more about this particular thing. Herbs are a great example because the amount of medicinal herbs out there is so vast that there's no way one single person on this whole earth could know and retain all the information about every single herb there is. I'm always hearing about herbs I've never heard of before, all the time. And for me to try to act like I know all these herbs, people ask me, have you heard of this? Nope, never heard of it. And I'll be honest, I'll tell you, I never heard of it, don't know anything about it. But that's why it's also great for you to know how to do your own research, to learn about it for yourself, especially if it's something that grows wild in your area and you can utilize it. That's just great. So once you do that, you're going to know more about the Indian ghost pipe or whatever some of these other herbs people have been bringing up than I do, because I haven't researched them, at least not yet. If I find these things growing in my area, that's when I start researching it. I usually don't go out of my way to research something that, well, one, I've never heard of before, or certainly that doesn't just naturally grow wild around here, unless I'm curious enough to consider trying to grow it myself. And I could go on and on with examples, like learning how to sew without a sewing machine. Years ago, I didn't have a sewing machine because my stupid electric machine at the time quit working, and I had a bunch of costumes to make, and I had to sew a bunch by hand. Well, now I'm back in that boat while I'm letting my knee heal because my treadle machine is too hard to run with just one foot, and using both legs to run it is putting too much strain on my knee. So I got to let my knee completely heal. Thus, I'm having to get back into hand stitching again. And that's fine. I'm enjoying it. So that's just an example. What if something happens to your sewing machine or to you where you can't run your sewing machine, be it a treadle or an electric? You need to know how to sew by hand. Remember, there's other ways to do things. A lot of times this goes back to even just what are the old-fashioned ways of doing things. That's why we learn how to use different types of lighting and ways to run things, be it hand power, foot power, ways to heat our homes, and so on, because you never know when something's going to happen and you're just stuck with, oh, great, how am I going to take a hot shower now? We don't have any power. Well, if you have a wood stove, put a pot of water on your wood stove and you'll be amazed what you can do with a pot of hot water. So again, I could go on and on with so many more examples, but this video will be way too long. I just wanted to give you the food for thought, and please share with us down below of ways that you have thought outside the box to problem solve for your own specific situation, because these are the stories that help keep our minds sharp and get us thinking, oh, that's something I can do. Because I've learned a lot from my subscribers who've taken the time to share their own personal stories. And there's just so much great wealth of information in there. I'm just here to be the catalyst to get it going, if nothing else, to share with you what I've done, what I've learned so far. But the people that comment down below can, just like in the Mullen video, because I'm not as experienced in using Mullen, people had so much great information in the comments there. So don't ignore those comments. There's a lot of great ones there. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.